Episode 128 of the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Welcome back. And if this is your first time, hey, welcome here. This podcast is designed for you, the volunteer youth worker, so that you can be encouraged and equipped to better disciple the students that you minister to on a weekly basis, that you're shepherding, that you're caring for. And we just know that you're making an eternal difference. And if we can get behind you in any way, shape, or form, we want to be helpful in the ministry that you are doing. Now, today's conversation is a really important one. I'm looking forward to being able to share this with you guys. Sid and I got a chance to chat with our friend Jason Ballard and talk through this really important topic. But before we get there, wanted to make sure you knew two things. If you're listening to this live, we are in the midst of a tour across our country of Canada, connecting with Point youth workers, those that are in the decision-making seat of youth ministries. And we got a few more dates coming up. So if you're in Ontario or the East Coast, be sure to head over to the website that we've linked in the show notes. You can check in with us and then stay tuned. If you missed it, we are looking at offering a digital version of that at some point before the end of 2021. And so would love to get that out to anybody that could not make it in person. Lastly, before we get into things, man, we are so grateful for today's sponsor, Trinity Western University. They make this podcast happen with their partnership with us. And we've been with them for a number of years, actually, connected with between the organizations. And so we know and love the work that they do and the team over there at Trinity Western. Honestly, as you look to your grade 11, 12 students and wondering, man, I wonder if there's ways that I can encourage them to take steps in their faith journey, even beyond our youth ministry, Trinity Western is a great spot for that. They got a large number of different degree options and are very competitive when it comes to the marketplace and students getting a quality education. But on top of that, the most important thing is they really do care about the character and the faith of their students. And so make sure to check out their website. It's linked in the show notes. And as we head into the end of 2021, just so you know, some of your students that are going to be graduating this year, they're starting to look obviously already at schools. And so feel free and be confident in sending them off to Trinity Western. All right, let's jump into today's conversation between Sid, Jason, and I.
Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers. So we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
Sid and Jeremy here. Sid, why don't you introduce yourself? I feel like maybe we've got some new listeners who don't know who you are. We should fill people in.
Jared, this might be my favorite time of the podcast is actually when I get to speak about myself, mostly speak about my wife and the work that she does at Green Bay Bible Camp here in Kelowna, in case you didn't know, working with passing faith on to the next generation. So I just wanted to bring that up again for new listeners, because I usually try to make sure our listeners know that. And then the other thing that I love, other than being the husband of Jennifer Coop, is working with the youth worker community and helping, encouraging, and equipping youth workers to better disciple kids next week in the ministries they're in. So doing this stuff, man, I love it. It's such a gift.
So good. And so you and I are here today interviewing our great friend, Jason Ballard. Jason, how do you introduce yourself these days when you meet somebody that you don't know?
Yeah, like in Vancouver, I'm mostly meeting like my kids' friends from school, and I just very sheepishly go, I'm a pastor, and then I kind of like duck in case they're no. And you know what's awesome? They always go, really? They pay you to do that? Like that's the conversation. So
you can make enough money to look after yourself on one day a week of work. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I'm a pastor of a church called The Way in Vancouver, and some friends and I lead an organization called the Church Leaders Network. And I'm really I'm all in to help build the church in Canada. That's really what I'm after. And so it's a no-brainer to hang out with guys like you and to have conversation about youth ministry. What I like about this podcast a lot is it goes at the heart of youth ministry, but sometimes you get like deeply practical as well. And I think that we all need to grow in our crafts wherever we're serving in the church, whether it's youth ministry or worship ministry or pulpit ministry or recovery and addiction ministry. I think we all need to remember what it's about, what's at the heart of it, and grow in the craft. And you guys are doing such a good job. And so I'm really honored to be here. And I'm excited about today's conversation because I think we're going to talk about people coming to know Jesus. And I think that's a very important thing. That's what we're about. We're about people coming to know Jesus. And I wonder if like something that is so essential to faith has sort of become fuzzy and unclear and maybe deprioritized in the mix of it all. And so I don't know. I'd love to hear from you guys how you want to frame this one.
Jay, you know what? I think it's like, it's kind of tongue in cheek, or where we have to say we're actually about kids coming to know Jesus. But in all honesty, man, that is so easily forgotten. And I want to be careful when I say this, but for some good reasons, it's forgotten. So in the sense that there was a time in ministry when we would try to kind of manipulate the moments to get to this space where we could just get a kid to raise their hand or say a prayer. Or I remember at camp, man, I had the 4 Spiritual Laws booklet. I needed to get them to write their name on the back. Like, this was legit, and that was it. And then when that moment was done, see ya, I'm moving on to something else. And so there was something about that we've appropriately, positioned ourselves against, I would like to say. That's more
Can
fitting.
we stay there for a little bit?
What's that? Sorry, go Jay?
Can we park there a little bit?
Yeah,
I think
good,
we got to talk about that, because there was an overemphasis.
Yeah.
And let's just pause. Let's just take our time here for a little bit. Because here's what's interesting. So I'm 33 now, and I am seeing at our church people in their 30s and late 20s reconnect with God in church. And more than we're seeing totally non-Christians, we're seeing people reconnect with faith, and almost all of them point back to a moment like you described, and most of them very fondly.
Right.
And something was like a seed. Now, here's what they often don't look back on fondly. That was all the environment they're part of cared about.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it just became about maybe morals and rules alongside that, which is also important, but we're not having that conversation today. But essentially, this is why it's so important to talk about this, is because sometimes it was unhealthy, because the only emphasis was whether they prayed a certain prayer and made a certain decision. We've found ourselves saying, well, let's not focus on making people pray and make a decision. And I think that's actually the wrong overcorrection. Because they're strangely, to my surprise, and I'm still scratching my head, how fruitful somehow people years later, like the Spirit of God did something in a moment. Like for me, I don't know what your testimony is, Sid, but like I was a kid at Anvil Island summer camp who didn't follow Jesus, and the speaker did the thing. He had a bow and arrow, and he pointed it at the, I just remember his bow and arrow, and he shot it and he was like, sin is missing the mark. I don't even remember the analogy, but I remember standing behind my cabin by myself, because I walked by myself, and feeling the conviction. Now looking back, I know what it was. It was a conviction of the Holy Spirit, and my cabin leader leading me in a prayer of salvation. And that following year, my parents going, Jason's not the same person anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember the details of the talk. And so I'm so thankful that so this is what's so interesting, is there's this tension where it's like, man, I think we need to critique sometimes the overemphasis, especially pressuring people. My goodness, we should never pressure people. But if the only way to move away from that is ignoring giving people the opportunity to come to know Jesus in a life-changing way, and not acknowledging that's also a journey over time of transformation as the Spirit begins to mingle more and more in your heart, I think that like we need to nuance it, think about it better, but not leave it behind. What do you guys think?
There's a couple of things that come to my mind. I think when I'm thinking, and by the way, my story is so incredibly similar to that. At camp, speaker, talking about that Jesus doesn't want 99%, he wants 100%. I remember it so clearly, and it was personal for me, and it was transforming. So I'm with you there. I think the part that I want to critique, Jay, is I don't want to critique the idea that we should have moments where we call to make confession or decisions to follow Jesus. I'm so all in on that. Love that. In fact, I think we need to do more of them, and that calls to decision-making, flag planting should actually be a little bit more consistent throughout. So I like that. I think my concern, much like what you said, is more for us as youth leaders, that we realize that our work with kids are more than just that moment. And one of the dangers is when it's just that moment, if we don't feel like we can get there, we disengage and find a kid that we think can get there. And so we end up treating kids like programs maybe, or projects, I should say. And I want to stand against, like we want to stand against that. We want to lean into journeying, sacrificing for others, all others, because they've been made in the image of God. So we don't quit on them if they're not taking the exact same path that we're taking. And that we see, faith formation, like you said, as a journey that includes moments, but doesn't end at moments. and also doesn't remove moments. So they're a part of it, but they're a part of something much bigger. I think that makes sense. But I'm with you, like Jay, I'm so with you that I think we have moved away from calling kids to make a decision to follow Jesus. And I think we're going to be held accountable for that. I actually think that's wrong, man.
And let me reframe it, or put another way, is I think even in our hearts, maybe we've lost touch with the fact that the best thing that could ever happen to the students we meet is they would come to know Jesus, that the Spirit of God would fill their heart, and then they would belong to the family of God in dynamic, transformative community. That's what we want. And you know what really came clear to me? I was walking with my friend Jonathan Evans, who is like the community coordinator for Salvation Army and has a church called Boundless, primarily work with people on the downtown east of Vancouver. So addiction, people in addiction, people with mental health challenges, lots going on. And he's an incredible guy. And every time I'm with him, I'm like embarrassed. I feel like he's a real pastor and I'm just a chump pretending to be a pastor. And I walk with him through Strathcona and the downtown east side. And I remember, and there's hundreds of organizations trying to do work. And there's so much money. There's not a shortage of money. There's not even a shortage of volunteers. I said, what's the hope? Like, how do we do this, man? Like, how do we make a difference in this area? He goes, people have got to come to know Jesus. He's like, one at a time, we need to help people meet Jesus. Now, here's what he's not saying. He's not saying that the only thing he's going to do to serve and love and support them is hand out gospel tracts. No, he's walking with youth who are from single parent homes. He's helping, he's getting involved. He's caring for them, food, education, love, support, all of that. No strings attached. There's no like agenda that he has to push. But his desire all along is that along the way, he would be able to invite people as the Spirit leads, sensitive, watching for open opportunities to invite people to take next steps in their walk with God. And then he'd probably go one step further and just praying a prayer. He goes, that's not enough. We have to help disciple them into Christian community and a Christian life. But that desire that people would come to know Jesus and that this is good news. And so I think the cautions we're trying to make is, in the midst of all this, let's not lose that deep desire that helps us pray for our students and look for those opportunities. But while we do that, let's temper it by not pressuring students in an uncomfortable way and not seeing it as a long-term journey over time. I think if we can lower the pressure, not make people feel pressured into a bad, like, I've got to pray this thing, that's a good thing if we can lower the pressure. So it's invitation, not coercion.
Yeah, great.
Invitation, not coercion. And then as we go forward, it's example. You know, we lead with example and invite them to take those next steps, but we see it as a journey over time.
Yeah, I think, Jay, right now while we're recording this, I'm involved with the camp helping do staff training, and we're working through Ephesians a little bit, which is shockingly Jesus-centered. Like, as I'm going through Ephesians again, I'm just overwhelmed at how often the author of Ephesians speaks about in Jesus for his glory through, just shockingly Jesus-centered. And one of the things that we're talking about as staff is going, hey, maybe one of the reasons why we're not so interested in calling kids to make a decision to follow Jesus is because we don't see Jesus for who he actually is. Like, if we really treasure Jesus for who he is, we couldn't help but invite people into making a decision to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Like, the things I'm most passionate about are the things I'm most talking about and the things I'm most inviting other people to come and enjoy and journey with me. And so for me, our hesitancy to actually invite kids to make a decision to follow Jesus, I feel like the Spirit's convicting me and going, well, maybe this is more about my relationship with Jesus or lack thereof than it is actually about a philosophical position on inviting kids to make a decision. Because if my love for Jesus grows, if I see him for who he really is, it's probably going to be pretty hard for me to not. If I think that Jesus is the absolute best thing that kids can experience, that it will bring flourishing, it will transform their being, there's nothing that compares to the reality that Jesus Christ brings into their life, then as someone who loves others, I'm going to be compelled to bring them in. And by the way, this isn't, and this is, we talk about this with youth leaders lots, that if you want, let's say you want your students to start sharing their faith with their peers, we as youth workers need to be modeling that with our peers And I just got off a phone call today with a friend of mine saying, hey, pray for me. I'm with a buddy, doesn't know Jesus, and I really need to have a heart for him to meet Jesus.
Yeah.
And actually, my first step is to go, what's my heart for Jesus in order to be able to do that? And I just think that might be part of the conversation that we need to be, or one of the things we need to be wrestling through as youth workers is, where is our vision of Jesus in this process?
Okay, can I ask then the question? You got a youth worker here listening, looking up, realizing, I don't know if we have had teenagers come to know Jesus for the first time in our ministry for a long stretch, whatever that feels like in their context, but it's a long stretch. So you got some church kids that are kind of like, their faith is growing deeper, so that's nice. Maybe there's some new kids kind of milling around, and so that's nice. But like that whole, hey, we've got somebody who's experienced conversion in the most traditional sense of the word. What should they do? How worried should they be? What happens next for them?
I think that I think it's good to acknowledge where things are at. Hey, we're not seeing people come to know Jesus. Not beat yourself up for it. But then to kind of have a conscious point of like, hey, are we here that young people would come to know Jesus? People who are in the church and out of the church, because I think each child who grows up in the church also needs a chance to make some of those decisions for themselves. And that's lots of decisions. For me, growing up in the church, it was, I talked about that one transformative moment, but then there was that, like, there's moments along the way that felt like recommitment. That's really powerful, really, really important. But first to acknowledge where it's at. And then I think second is to begin to fast and pray, as a team, as an individual volunteer or as a team. And that could look like walking the city. And, I remember when I was a teenager, I read this book, called Following Jesus. And encouraged me to go to a high place, like to a hill or a mountain in my area, and then look down at my city. And so I remember going up to the top of it, looked over a school, and it said, "Pray that God would give you tears of compassion for the people in the city." And I remember praying, "God, touch me, touch my eyes, touch my heart." And he did. He gave me a heart over time. It wasn't just a one-off. I remember that being a really powerful moment, and then continuing to pray. And God softened my heart. And it wasn't long before I longed that people would come to know Jesus. And he did that in my heart. It wasn't false guilt. It wasn't fake. And that love for others, it propelled me. And I find myself now as an adult saying, God, do that in my heart again. Do what you did in my heart as a teenager for my friends that don't know Jesus. And so my prayer for youth workers is, don't beat yourself up, but ask God to touch your heart, that you would long for the young people in your care to have a personal, formative relationship with Jesus, and then begin to intercede and contend for that to happen. So the first thing in prayer that happens is compassion begins to grow for them, that heart for the lost. But then in the place of prayer, we actually do some of the work where we say, God, can you spiritually move mountains in the life of this young person, that they may have their eyes open? And honestly, I really believe that if we start in that place of consistent contending prayer, the ideas will come, the conviction will come, the opportunities will come. I'm not saying don't do practical things. I really do believe at least a few times a year, we need to give people an opportunity to give their lives to Jesus. And some people will be doing it for the first time, but other people will be marking something that's already happened in their heart. So sometimes that's the pushback, is that people go, was it in that moment or did it happen earlier? I'm not sure. And we don't have to worry about that. God's already mingling with their heart. They're making decisions, but the opportunity of saying, hey, if you're not sure where you stand with God and you want to pray, just to say, God, I want to invite you to be the Lord of my life. I want to invite you to forgive me of my sins. If you've never done that before, it's a beautiful thing. Why don't we do that together? And then to honor and celebrate those that do. They might not be, quote unquote, getting saved in that moment, but they mark something that God's been doing in their heart, maybe a step they've already taken with a moment like that. But for others, it will be the very first time.
Yeah. Jay, I love it so much. This resonates with my heart so much. And I really think as we come into this next new year, if we would start making, first of all, what if our staff training, so volunteers, you get together as a team, many of you, and you're trying to plan and prep the year. It shouldn't be that radical, but what if we take a day to pray and fast for our students and pray and fast that this year we would see kids who have never made a decision to follow Jesus before do that. And then we would look to plan a couple of moments where appropriately, respectfully, with all sorts of dignity, we would invite kids, make clear opportunities for kids to do that. And never is going to be perfect. That's fine. It's no problem. Jesus works with us like constantly in spite of ourselves. I think retreats are wonderful places, again, not to be manipulative, but because we feel safe, we get to experience community over a longer period of time. Those are great moments to actually make decisions. And I think that kind of thing would be really wonderful. And just make this a priority for this year. You guys, we've talked about this a lot. The last 2 years, camps where so many kids made decisions to follow Jesus have not existed to the full capacity that they have over, decades before this moment. And for those of you who are in organizations or for those of you who are in churches, maybe what God is asking us to do in these spaces is to fill that gap a little bit and just become that much more intentional. And again, not manipulative, not pressured, just that much more intentional. And I love the idea of beginning first asking the Lord to renew our hearts and give us a vision for what should be and a right heart for our kids, and then to plan intentionally and thoughtfully for how to create spaces for God to do that significant type of work in the lives of our kids. And we don't have to judge on metrics because it's not a fail or win based upon numbers. That it's about being faithful in intentionally, appropriately creating these moments to invite kids to follow Jesus. And that would be a really beautiful start to this next year.
Yeah, so good. As we come in here to the end, any last words that you guys would have for youth workers kind of processing this?
I would encourage them that the power is in the message of the gospel, not in the quality of the presentation. And we got to remember this. It is water for a weary soul. It is foolishness for those that don't believe, but when the Spirit of God's mingling with the heart, it is life and power. And I remember hearing Danielle Strickland tell a story about when she was like part of like recently after she got saved and, coming out of, her past, which was filled with crime and challenges. And she was doing this like thing. She had to share her faith. And like, she had like a track type thing. She sat beside like a stranger and then presented. And she said, "Do you want to become a Christian?" And the lady was like, "Yeah." And then Danielle was like, no. Like, that was too simple. Like, you must not get it. So then she did a longer, like, no, it's not like, cause she did the simple, like 4-step thing. And then the person's like, no. And then like, "Would you like to become Christian?" Like, "Yeah." And then she's like, no, you must not get it. So like, she found herself actually being like, what? God wanted to use me. And she said the revelation she had was, I believed that God could change my life, but I didn't believe he could use me to change someone else's life. Yeah. And I've been struck again and again. Sid, you might feel the same way. You go through a clunky talk, but then you invite people to give their lives to Jesus, and then students respond, and you're like, no, I must have made it too simple or something, whatever. And I just think it's the power of the gospel. It really does change people's lives. And God has consistently throughout history been working through very, very, very broken, flawed people. And he wants to work through youth leaders and youth volunteers this year to lead students to come to know Jesus. It's the power of the gospel. It's not on us. It's the message has power.
It's a great word. Thank you guys so much for your time for processing this. If you're listening and you've got questions or you want to dig in a little bit deeper, of course, we would love to hear from you. And you can get in touch with any of us. Youthworker.team is a great way to send in a note, and we'll get that message that comes right into me. I can hand that off to the guys. And we're praying for you in this next season and hope that as we've been talking about, that it makes a big difference in the lives of kids, and in particular that they would choose to follow Jesus. That'd be awesome.